The next portion we're going to be designing is the content section of our website. So that's going to include everything inside of here. It's the main focus and the body copy of our site. And we're going to start out with these two primary areas at the top of the website, this little web design logo, and we're also going to create this little copywriting logo. So we'll start there. Now back over here in our mockup, we're going to want to set the background color of our content area to the same color that we set for the sidebar. So I'm just going to get the eye for the eyedropper tool and sample that color. And we'll come in here to our wireframe blocks, select our content area, and paste in that value and hit OK. Now the next step is going to be to design this little logo here. So we'll zoom in here nice and tight and design this up in this section right here. So the first step is to get our rounded rectangle tool, and we're going to create a rounded rectangle on its own layer. Now we'll create this just out here above our wireframe blocks. We'll create a new layer here, and we'll set the radius of this layer to be 5 pixels, and then we'll create this little box. Now if we zoom back out to 100%, you can kind of see the relative sizing there of our box. I'm going to make this a dark, we'll just make it black for now, that box there. And it's a little bit too big right now, so we can resize that down at a later date because it's going to be a complete vector object. It'll be resolution independent. Now the next thing we want to do is to design our little pencil icon. So I'm going to design this icon up and down alongside this icon, and then we'll overlay it at an angle right inside of here. So kind of the same workflow. We're going to get our rounded rectangle tool, and we'll draw out a long rounded rectangle for the pencil shape here. And that looks about good right there. So we'll drop that rounded rectangle in, and then we're going to add a couple of pieces and build a compound shape from this rounded rectangle. First thing we want to do is make this corner of the pencil pointed. So let's zoom in nice and tight here and get our white arrow tool to edit these individual anchor points. Now right now we have 2 anchor points, but we really don't need 2 anchor points. We just need 1. So I'm going to get the add anchor point tool, and I'm going to add an additional anchor point right in the middle of these 2. So I'll add that anchor point right there. I'm then going to select the convert anchor point tool and single click on that anchor point. And that essentially removes each of those Bezier handles which add the curve to the line. I'll then get the subtraction point anchor point tool. It's called the delete anchor point tool. And I'm going to delete the anchor point on the left and the anchor point on the right. Then I'm going to convert each of these 2 anchor points also to hard anchor points. So let's get back to the convert anchor point tool and click each of those, and that will convert that. And now we have a perfect little triangle there for the end of our pencil. If we go back to 100% view, we can kind of see how that looks. A little trick, if you see these little Bezier points and they're kind of getting in your road, you can press Command H, which is hide, and that'll temporarily turn those things off so you can kind of see the shape of your object. Now we have the rough shape of the pencil intact. I'm going to bring out the point just a little bit more. So I'm just going to select this shape again. Oops, I've got to turn back on my Command H to turn back on those anchor points. Select just this end anchor point. I'm just going to down arrow a couple of times to make that a little more extended. Now the next step is we need to cut out a couple of shapes from this in order to get our pencil shape. If we go back here and look at the pencil shape, we've kind of cut out the base there. We've kind of cut out the base there. So we want to cut those pieces out of our pencil as well. In order to do that, we're going to switch to the rectangle tool, and with our shape highlighted, we want to make sure we have subtraction mode. Now the modes in CS6, or rather Adobe Photoshop CC, the Creative Cloud version, are in this drop down over here. If you're on CS5 or other versions, they may be over here. So locate these modes of subtraction, addition, or exclusion, and we're going to set this to subtraction. You can also just hold down the Option key and it will automatically set it to subtraction. So we're just going to simply click, hold down the space bar to pull this out and where we need it, and let go, and then I'll subtract out a piece there. And then we're going to do the exact same thing down here. So subtract out a piece down here. Okay, now we want to make the size of these pieces that are cut out about the same. So we can always come in here and we can edit these shapes at any time with our white arrow tool. We can just select the anchor points that we want. We can select these top 2 anchor points and nudge this up to make sure that those are the exact same size. So that's kind of the shape of the pencil icon that we want to work with. And then we can overlay that pencil icon at an angle and end up with something that looks similar to this. So that'll be the portion we're going to do next. Now I'm going to take this entire shape and I'm going to free transform it just to stretch it out a little bit wider. So I'm just going to pull this out just a hair bit wider and we'll apply that transformation. And then I'm going to take this entire shape and rotate it, free transform it, Command T, and rotate it 45 degrees. And then I'll apply that transformation. Whoops, it doesn't look like we got the entire shape there. We need to undo that. Make sure that we get the entire compound shape. We deselect that again. And looks like that shape is for some reason stuck there. So what we need to do is cancel out of this dialog box and we can just get the white arrow tool and select all the anchor points in that shape and then free transform from there, and that should be able to pull the entire shape. Looks like it's working this time. So we're going to rotate it 45 degrees and then apply that transformation. Again, click the check box or Command Enter. And this will convert this from a live shape into a regular path. You'll probably only see this if you're in Adobe Photoshop CC. So we'll say that's okay. And now I'm just going to move this object with my move tool here on the layer and just position it over the top of this layer. If we look back here at our other icon, you can see it just kind of hangs out down here at the bottom right. So this icon maybe we'll position about right there. Now in order to be able to see that icon in relation to this background square here, I'm going to double click it and change its color just to red temporarily. Now in order to add this the same cutout size we have right here, we also want to add right here. So what we can do is maybe a simple way to do this is to measure that size, but we could measure the distance here and add a shape to get it exactly right, but I'm just going to kind of eyeball it. I'm going to switch back to the base layer here and get my add anchor point tool, and I'm going to add an anchor point right here and right here. And again, I'm just kind of eyeballing this to get a line that's going to go from one to the other. I can then get my white arrow tool and select these last 2 anchor points down here. Make sure I have both of them and just delete those. Press the delete key and delete those out. And then I can switch back the color of my pencil icon and switch that back to black. And then if we subtract out back to 100% view here, you can see kind of how that icon is now looking. And I would then group both of these layers together and put these as a smart object. So I'm going to right click both of these and convert those to a smart object so that it's just one layer makes up that icon. So there's the icon for the first little piece, and we'll go ahead and position this up here and add a little bit of title. The next one we want to do is the icon for the W over here. You can see there's a large capital W and then this little slight brush tool that's on one of the arms of the W. So we'll build that icon next. So we want to get the letter W and we want to get a font that has these nice serifs. So I'm going to pick Times New Roman, as that's a font that most people probably have installed on their system. So I'm going to choose Times New Roman. I'll get my type tool and come out here and select and just type the capital letter W. Once we have that letter in place, we can free transform it to resize it. So I'll snag that layer and Control T to free transform, or Apple T rather. And we'll bring that size up a little bit bigger. So Control T, and let's resize this up. And we want to make this about the same size as this object. So I'm just going to set it over the top as I resize it so the icons are about the same size there. And that looks about right. So I'll apply that transformation and then bring the W back over here. Now what we're gonna have to do is we're gonna have to build the similar thing. We wanna build a pencil icon that's gonna end up being the tail here of our W. Now in this particular example, it comes down. In the example I wanna do, I wanna make it go up. So either way, we still have to design our little paintbrush icon. So in order to do that, we're gonna have to jump to the pen icon. The name slipped me there for a second. The pen tool, and we'll have to custom build a little shape to design our pen. So I'm gonna zoom in here next to the W, and I'll select the pen, and we'll just create a new layer here. And we're just gonna build the shape of a pen. So I'm gonna click once up here to start the first point, and I'm gonna come down here and kind of bend in the shape of the handle. Now I'm actually kind of only building half, and then I'll replicate it for the other half so it's exactly symmetrical. So we'll build that, and that's gonna kind of come in a little bit. Whoops, I'm gonna undo that last point. So I'm gonna click and drag to build in the brush tip right here. So that'll come down, maybe the brush tip comes around like so. So we'll have to tweak with this shape in a little bit once we modify it. But let's take a look at that and see if that'll work for our brush. So what we want to do, it looks like if I grab a medium point here and let's drop it right on there. So if this brush was going to be reflected, you can kind of see where we need to adjust. So this top point needs to terminate right there. So I can get my white arrow tool and come in here and grab this anchor point and kind of bring that one back in a little bit. This one's probably coming out a little bit too thick, so I'll bring that one in as well. And those bottom points look like they'll work pretty good. So I'm just going to bring this tick in just right on that line there. Make sure that one's right on that line so that when we reflect this, it'll be symmetrical. So now this path, when we use the path tool, it stores those paths inside of the path over here. So I've got a couple here, working paths. That's the working path. Let's see, there's the brush that I just already created. So I'll delete those. So we do have our working path. Now I'm gonna right click this and say duplicate path. So I'm gonna drag it down and drop it on that new folder, and that creates a path from it. And then I'll drag it down and do that once more to duplicate it. So now I have two versions. I have exactly two copies of that path. So I'm going to take this bottom one and say edit, transform path, and I want to flip it along the horizontal axis. So I'm going to say flip horizontal, and you can see that just replicates it. And then I want to take that path and move it. So I'll get my black arrow tool, be able to move that path, and I can just use my arrow keys to nudge it right back in place right there. So you can see the top path is on the left and the bottom path is on the right. So there's those two shapes that are going to end up forming the shape for our brush. Now once we have both shapes, we can highlight both paths so that I have all of those paths highlighted, and then come back to my layers panel, and I'm going to create a new layer. Actually, I already have one. I created this layer earlier above my W, and on this layer we will fill it with the color and turn it into a vector mask. So let's do that next. We're going to grab our black arrow tool and right click in here, and we want to say create vector mask. So we'll create a vector mask from that shape, and then we can fill this layer with a solid color. For right now I'm just going to fill it with this same red. So I'll get my eyedropper tool, I sample that red, and make sure that just the pixel is highlighted, and then Alt backspace to fill with that color. Except I actually pushed Command, it's Alt backspace. Okay, so you can see that vector mask shape right there. And right now our mask is again inverted. I want this to be black and this to be white. So I can select that mask and deselect, select just a mask and press Control I. Whoops, I have the wrong, I'm still on the layer there. I need to make sure that I'm editing just this. For some reason my Photoshop is selecting both here. Let's see if we can unselect that mask. I'm going to start over on this shape because I think the shape must not be joined, so it's not allowing me to fill just the shape. So I'm actually just going to delete that layer, And I'm going to go back to my paths because both of my paths are still selected there, and highlight those again to highlight the actual paths. We'll come back to our layers and get our white arrow tool, and let's just make sure we have all those anchor points highlighted, and let's merge these together. So we can come up here to this command right here and combine the shapes so that they are combined. That's the option we want. And then let's right click in here again and let's create the shape. So it looks like first let's get a layer here we can create the shape on next to the W. We'll get our black arrow tool and come back in here and create the vector mask again. So we'll create vector mask, and it looks like that time it did actually work properly. So before that just was not combined, that's why it wasn't allowing me to create that mask. Now the vector mask is created, I can fill this layer with red. So I'll backspace, you can see that fills that with red, and now I'm left with my brush. So I'm going to select the move tool to get rid of this guide. So I'll pull this guide back off screen, and there's the little brush. And now I just want to cut out a couple of simple shapes in this brush, just like we did with the pencil. We cut out those. So we want to cut out a few simple shapes down there to give it a little bit more of a brush fill. So we'll select our vector mask icon and come back with our vector tools. And just like we did before, we want to work with the rounded rectangle. Sorry, not the rounded, the rectangle tool. Make sure that we hold down Option because we want to be in subtraction mode when we're working with this vector mask right here. So hold down Option and we will pull out a new tool. So let's go ahead and subtract that out. When we're subtracting this area out, we need to make sure that we're on the path mode and not shape mode. If we're on shape mode, we'll try to create a new shape, and we want to subtract from this existing path. So we'll switch this to path and then get our rectangle tool, make sure we have subtraction mode, which is the Option key, and we'll just subtract out a couple of rectangles inside of here like we did before. So we'll cut out a little one here, and we'll cut out a little one right below it. Maybe a little bit thinner. Okay, so we'll just cut those two shapes out like so. And again, we can go in and refine those if we need to. Now I'm going to take this entire layer, which has this entire path and this vector mask on it, and we're going to rotate it. So I'm going to free transform that layer and rotate this path around so that we can align it along with this stem right here. So let's say transform, and we're going to rotate and make sure we have our move tool selected so we can actually rotate this. And we need to rotate it along the degrees. So let's just say, let's do 180 to start off with. Whoops, I've just got one of the paths selected. I need to undo that. That was the same issue we had before. We'll press A to highlight all of these anchor points, and then we can free transform and rotate them as a unit. So we'll rotate it all the way up and over, and I'm just going to drag this up on top of this and rotate it so it just kind of comes along where this stem would fall. So maybe we'll kind of play around with this a little bit to align this up along this stem of the W here. Okay, I'll consider that good for now, and probably pull this down just a hair and over. And that looks about right. So I'll apply that transformation. Say yes. Now I want to mask out, I don't want any of this W to be there in this particular stem. So I'm going to go to my W layer and create just a simple layer mask on there. Get my brush tool and switch my color to black and just simply brush out that stem along there like so. And maybe I'll kind of brush down here a little bit as well. Whoops, I just hit Control Z, so I've got to repaint that out. And I probably want to make that stem brushed out as well. So I'll just do my polygonal lasso tool here, and I'll just make a selection that comes right down the edge of this. Just create a quick selection there. Double click to finish that off and fill that with black. So I'll backspace to fill that with black. And we'll consider that done. So let's back up to 100%. And we have that little logo. So I want to make the W black and the paintbrush black. So I'll double click my text, change it back to black, and we'll fill this layer with black as well. If your foreground and background color are not black, you can press D on the keyboard and that switches them to black and white. And then I can simply do Alt Delete to fill that layer with black. And now we have those two icons set. We can continue on with building the little text here. We'll do our little call out box and then just simply finish off with a few of these text boxes down below.